This is Immigrants Making an Impact podcast and community. In this community, we believe in the power of storytelling. We believe that our stories are powerful and they are capable of changing the world positively. I would entreat you to subscribe and share this podcast with your loved ones. Thank you for your support all these years. We are thankful to have Gurasis Singh on this episode. Gurasis is the host of my Thick Accent podcast. He is a passionate storyteller celebrating immigrant journeys, knowing each other beneath the accent, bridging cultures through stories. He's also a healthcare advertising professional. Gurasis, thank you for coming. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you, Mami. Thank you for having me. Pleasure being here. Looking forward to this conversation. And yes, so hi everyone. My name is Gurasis Singh. I was born in the northwestern part of India, in a state, or how we call it in Canada, the province called Punjab. I was born there. I spent the first 20 years of my life there, and then I immigrated to Canada in 2018. And now I work in pharmaceutical advertising. And as Mami said, I'm also the founder of and the host of the podcast called My Thick Accent.
We will delve into the podcast later, but tell us how you landed as an immigrant in Canada, right?
Yes, exactly.
So tell us about your immigrant story. You could have chosen to go anywhere, and at the age of 20 years, why did you set out all by yourself and leave your parents behind, your friends, your culture, the known for the unknown? Why did you do that?
I always find this question very interesting because whenever I really look back and see that why did I choose to move abroad, I always think about it that I always say that it was definitely like destiny. I feel like I was meant to move abroad or somehow like a different country. And I say that because I feel like the things that I'm able to do right now, I might not have been able to do it in India, be it the exposure or be it being able to connect with people and incredible individuals just like yourself. But going back to the initial time, I feel like I had a certain discussions with my parents where I wanted to move to a different city after I finished my high school, that I want to go to a different city and study. And I remember my parents saying that to me, we can do anything to keep you with us. We would not like you to go anywhere out of the city. Little did they know, I will move to a whole new different part of the world, So I always say this was like destiny. And the reason I chose Canada was because since many of our listeners might know, or you might know that in Canada, there is a major Indian population, or to be more specific, like a major Punjabi population, right? And that's why my parents had a little bit of security that, okay, we are sending our son to a place where there is a little bit of familiarity, whether it's the food or the people. Like I would also say that 90% of my classmates I studied with in my 12th grade are in Canada right now. 90%. That's insane if you think about the number. And I mean, they're spread like all over Canada. Some of them are in Yukon also. Some of them are in British Columbia. Some are in Ontario. Like I myself live in Quebec. So that's why Canada seemed like a better option. And also Canada does make immigration quite easier than other countries if I really look at the whole process of it and the whole toll it takes on you. So that's why I end up choosing Canada and just going there and trying to experience a life in a new world. Yeah.
Great. So it seems like it has all been cozy, a nice ride when you came. Tell us about it. When you came as a newcomer, how was it like? So the integration process, the new culture, making friends, did you go to school? Did you find work? How was it like in general?
Of course, I came to study in 2018 this incredible program called Media Strategies and Advertising. And I will give you like a little bit of synopsis of my whole journey because why not? This might be like a long answer, but so like I said, I came to study this incredible program called Media Strategies and Advertising, which was like an amalgamation of advertising, marketing, social media, advertising, law, and even graphic designing. In fact, like everything I wanted to study. So once I finished that, I got the opportunity to intern with a startup, which was basically a SaaS company where I worked as a communication specialist and a social media coordinator. And like I said, since it was a startup and at its really early stage, I would say I was wearing like different hats every day. So that was like an amazing experience really to understand the Canadian culture and the workplace. So I worked there for about 9 months. I could not continue to work there because as an immigrant in Canada, one needs to get into a certain job roles to be able to accumulate those points in order to start the process of their permanent residency. But, unfortunately, the day I got my postgraduate work permit after my studies, 3 days later, the pandemic entered our life. And just like the rest of the world, I was also just sitting at home, contemplating my life and my next steps. And then it wasn't until 2022, almost like 2 years later, when I finally got my desired job and my permanent residency as well, fortunately, by God's grace. So those 2 years were definitely like not a smooth ride, after my work permit. There were good and bad days. There were rejections and realizations, victories and defeats. But I would say that I 100%, came out as a stronger and a better version of myself. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you do it? Let's start from the process of traveling from India to Canada. How do you navigate that? So trying to find a school. If there's anybody listening across the globe and wants to take a journey from somewhere around the world to come to Canada for school, what does she need to do, or he?
So, I'm sure like in whichever the country one resides in or like an aspiring immigrant resides in, there are like certain agents and, consultants who can actually tell you the next steps and what are the requirements to move to a new foreign land to study. So in my case, I live in Amritsar, which is one of the initial cities of the northern Punjab. And, we have those consultants here as well. I just visited them. I told them about my willingness to study abroad, then also the program which I wanted to study. Like, for example, they showed me, I believe, 3 to 4 universities and colleges that I can go to. So I chose this particular college in Montreal, which was LaSalle College. And I chose that because I feel like the contents that it had, the courses it had, really, really resonated with me and my future goals. So that's basically the initial processes. I went to them, I told them about my, interests and the courses I would like to, really pursue in the future. They showed me some options and I paid the cost that it requires, the tuition fee and the whole process of getting the visa and everything, and then eventually I took a flight and came to Canada. But obviously, like, it wasn't like something that happened overnight. It took like months and months. There were also the times where there were like certain agents who even wasted my some money, who even wasted my few months also. So, there are like all these experiences and ups and downs and turbulences even before you move abroad. And then yeah, eventually everything turns out well. And then I was able to go abroad, to a foreign land. Yeah.
Great, thanks for sharing that. So let's pause and reflect. How has the journey been so far as an immigrant? Has it been worth it? Tell us about the ups and downs. And during such times of challenges, how were you able to overcome them?
Of course. So this is wow, it's like a really heavy, loaded question, because it always like, takes you back to the whole journey and it kind of forces you to reflect on everything that you have gone through and obviously like you have powered through also, right? So, so immigrating to Canada, like I said, was probably my very first international flight I took. It was obviously filled with excitement and anxiousness also at the same time. Before that, think I never left my parents, like I said, I never left their shelter apart from going to a different city for a month or two. And I believe even then I stayed with my relatives. So coming to Canada and starting anew was definitely a challenge in itself. And I would like to talk like chronologically because I feel like the major challenges is something which everybody talks about, maybe the job or maybe the, even getting the permanent residency and everything is something people have talked about a lot. I'd like to talk about some human things which makes us all human. I would like to talk about those things. And first thing I will tell you is the accommodation. It might not be talked about a lot, but I'll tell you. I mean, I was prepared for everything. Like I know I would be able to do all the chores myself. I have to do everything on my own. I need to do my whole cooking and everything on my own. But I never knew that it will take forever for me to find an accommodation. So I actually started by, living with an acquaintance or somebody I basically found randomly on Messenger. And he was so nice and sweet. And he allowed me to stay at his house, for the initial 10 days. And after that, I believe I was like moving places every new week with my big 3 suitcases. And I was literally like washing and re-wearing the same 2 turbans and shirts like for like 3 to 4 weeks, literally. And that finally I was able to open my suitcases when I found my house, which which was, I believe, in my sixth week in Canada. So I feel like for the first 6 weeks, I was just roaming here and there with my all suitcases. That was like probably the biggest challenge. And guess what? The moment I got that house, I still remember the date. It was like 26th September. The person was so nice, he even allowed me to enter the house before the actual start of the month. He was like, okay, sure, you can come. And you guess what? I never left that house for like 2 years. And I was so attached. I was like, it's so hard to find a house. I'm not leaving this house anytime soon. That was the first thing. The second thing was, cooking. And I said that because I never cooked. Just like me, not only me, I would say like many of my listeners also who might be international students or, the people who just move abroad for the first time. I personally never cooked back in India, apart from like whisking an egg omelette or even like, making Maggie. So Maggie is like the famous Indian noodles, which is apparently not even originated in India. It was originated for India by Nestle. Anyways, so I actually taught myself to cook, by asking recipes from my mother, from my siblings, and from YouTube, obviously. So I feel like eventually I discovered a chef within me. And I'm so glad I did because now I'm able to like try and cook multiple cuisines all the time. That was also a challenge. It might not be talked about a lot, but how important it is to eat good and correct food because you really, for example, in my case, I really lost a lot of weight when I moved abroad. I lost like 20 kgs, around. So that was also obviously a challenge. So I basically overcame that by learning and teaching myself how to cook. And third, obviously something which is the accent part of it and which I am so passionate about. And I also have a podcast about it. I will talk about it more in the later conversation. So, just a little bit of background to everybody that, so 10% of the Indian population speaks English, which is like around 120 million, which is basically 4 times the size of Canada. But when I came to Canada, I realized that I used to speak an absolute different version of English back in India because it was such a task to be able to make people understand what I'm saying. And trust me, it was mainly the pronunciations and the rolling of R's, So for example, I've said this example multiple times on my show that, in India, we say work. We don't say work. We say birth. We don't say birth. We say turban. We don't say turban. Even my name, we say Gurasis, not Gurasis or Gurasis or even Jurasis. I've heard people calling me, but I obviously don't blame them, because they have learned a certain way to say things. And I think it's high time we also own our accent. So that was also a challenge. So that actually took a little bit of time to get accustomed to each other's accents, because even for me, it was so hard for me to understand some of my professors. I remember my professor, I don't want to name the subject, but this professor was talking and I'm like, oh my God, like how am I going to pass this exam? I have no idea what he's saying. So it took me a little bit of time to really understand that. So that was the challenge. And then came the challenge of regarding the work permit. So, as per the previous rules in Canada, and I say previous because, things are changing so rapidly in Canada right now that it's really hard to keep track of all the rules. So earlier, when an international student who studied for 16 months or more in Canada was granted the work permit for 3 years, which was sufficient enough if one used it very wisely to get on the path to become a permanent resident. But the thing was, I studied for, 14 months, and anything less than 16 gives you the work permit for the equal number of months you studied. So therefore, I had only 14 months to figure everything out. But like I mentioned, I got the work permit 3 days prior the pandemic was announced. So that really wasted whole my 14 months, and that really took a toll on me. And that actually takes me to the next point, which is the job. In that moment, the priority shifted from, finding the desired job to actually survival and finding a ray of hope or something that can help me extend my stay in the country. But, I must say that within that whole period, I would say that my optimism was probably the biggest driving force throughout those months. And if you ask me what was the source, I really don't know what was the source of it. Maybe some higher power or my parents, I believe. Yeah, for sure. My parents, this was probably the biggest source for me. And I always had this belief that I know my work permit will get extended. I know it will extend it. My parents used to say, how do you know it's going to get extended? My friends used to tell me, how do you know? I said, I don't know, but I just personally feel this is going to get extended. And guess what? That's what happened. The new policies were announced. I got the extension for 8 months. And then then I got the extension for another 18 months. And then I was able to figure out everything and get the job and get my permanent residency as well. So that happened. And then lastly, obviously, was something regarding the networking. And I say networking was also a challenge because from having a network of your parents and uncles and aunts the day I was born to building a new network altogether in a new world was a whole another ball game. So that was obviously a challenge. But I would say that, all in all, there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, I would say that.
Congratulations on your permanent residency.
Thank you. Yeah.
It has been quite a journey, and you have been able to navigate it up until this time. So that tells
Yeah.
us that it is possible. I think that as immigrants, we need representation. If we see others do it, then we know that it is possible. And it doesn't matter your thick accent,
Absolutely.
it doesn't matter the color of your skin, it doesn't matter where you are coming from, where you have lived before. There's always a possibility. So one thing that stands out as you spoke was being positive. You always knew that you
100%.
will have this residency. You knew that you have this extension. You didn't know how, but you knew it will happen, and it did happen for you. So I think that is
Yeah.
my greatest takeaway from what you've just said.
Yeah.
So as we move on, do you believe
Mhm.
in mentorship and why?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say that, I mean, that mentorship plays a vital role in everybody's life, whether you are an immigrant or even decided to remain in your home country. And I say that because there are times and moments in your life, especially, if you think about the time when you are just thrown out in the world to figure it out after your high school. Before that, you know that you're going to get after the sixth grade, the seventh grade, the eighth grade, the ninth grade, or whatever. That's the system, at least in India. But after your 12th grade, you are just thrown out that go figure it out and figure out your interests and next steps of your life, right? So I feel like at that particular moment, you definitely need a helping hand to at least, show you the ropes. And on top of that, if you are an immigrant, juggling between these multiple roles of being a chef or being a caregiver, an accountant for yourself, an immigration consultant for yourself, you're also a crisis management expert somehow for yourself, etc., etc. You need to consult an additional person or somebody, who has walked the path and can definitely help you accelerate, your success in a foreign land. So 100% I believe in mentorship. Yeah.
Wonderful. Those are very valid points. Thank you. Could you share with us some ideas on constant learning and self-improvement to stay ahead of your industry as an immigrant?
Absolutely. I think once again, it's not limited to being an immigrant. Like for me, like I absolutely love advertising industry. I think I got exposed to it during my bachelor's. I was doing bachelor's in journalism and mass communication. That's when I got exposed to the marketing and advertising industry. And I remember getting on the interviews and the moment somebody would ask me that, tell us like about your favorite ad, I would have like a list of 50 ads to tell them because I was so passionate about it and I was getting like so acquainted with every industry and every type of genre, whether it's like whether it's like, whether in the pharmaceutical, for example, like I am currently in pharmaceutical advertising, right? So any certain medicines, how were those being advertised to people? How was that marketed to people? I believe it all goes down to the certain research and getting familiarized with everything that comes new in your industry. Like I'm talking about my industry, obviously, because I can talk about it, but obviously it's very subjective to each industry, whether it's IT, for example. No, IT is changing so rapidly right now. Whether this is AI also coming in and this coding languages kind of like people are getting exposed to, and so much is happening in technology right now. So I believe it's very subjective to each industry. But for me personally, I'm actually like on top of like some of the certain features that come up in the way advertisers are working or certain laws that are coming up within advertising industry. So I always make sure I make myself acquainted with everything that is coming up new in the industry. And I think I do that definitely getting subscribed to certain newsletters. Like right now, LinkedIn also, you are able to get subscribed to those newsletters, of certain agencies. Like I follow like so many advertising agencies, and that also kind of helps me educate myself with anything new that comes up or certain particular project that certain company is working on or a certain brand just like kind of in the process of getting launched. So I think it really helps me to make myself educated. Yeah.
Okay, so it's very important to keep learning to stay ahead of your game.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the difference you are making as an immigrant in your community. Tell us about how you
Mhm.
serve and why. Tell us about your podcast.
Of course. So, yes, I have a podcast. It's called My Thick Accent. Yes, it's called My Thick Accent. And with this podcast, I aim to break the stereotypical molds that immigrants are asked to fit in because we are way, way beyond our accents or our looks. I don't like when people confine us or define us just because of the way we look or we speak. And while talking about this, I would like to talk about the point of, creating an impact about that. I will really talk about that. And I personally see impact as something that is a long game where it's important for me to focus on the quality of it, rather than the quantity. Because the impact that those one-on-one conversations have had on me was far superior than somebody giving a speech on the stage. And that's why, I aim to do it with the podcast where I'm speaking directly into people's ears. So that really like stay with them. And, I also feel, that creating an impact that right from where you are, your roommates, your family, your friends, your neighbors, if you can create a positive impact in their lives, then there is the whole world to cater to. So through this podcast, through this channel, I'm bringing forth the stories of these incredible immigrants, even yourself. I would love to have you on the show as well, where I usually unfold people's personal journeys of struggle, resilience, and the whole process of finding home away from home because it's hard. And I really want to tell people, whether it's the current immigrants or the aspiring immigrants, who want to start in a new world, I want to tell them that, hey, you are not alone in this, everything that's happening with you, all these experiences that you are going through, the ups and downs, the turbulences, and those points of questioning your identity, or the points where your international experience is completely invalidated. You are not alone into this. There is life beyond that. Do not really, sometimes you have to rough up your edges or change yourself and become somebody else who you are not. Do not do that. These people have been what they are and they have made an impact and they have gone past everything that have come their way. So you can do it too. I want to inspire people that, you can do it as well. Do not limit yourself just because you think you have an accent or you look a certain way. So that's what I aim to do through the podcast, My Thick Accent. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for the impact that you are
Mhm.
making. You are touching a lot of lives, so keep going. We are cheering you on.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
I think you have touched on this. How can one make an impact? Is there anything you want to say more? How can one make an impact?
Like I said, it all starts with where you are, be it helping them, or, like I say, there are tons of people throughout my journey, Mame, who has left an impact on me because they were very selfless in terms of helping me. And that has only happened also because I was able to ask for that help. And I would say, if one is struggling with something, it's okay to ask for that help. And if somebody else reaches out to you, feel a little privileged also that a person had the audacity. Appreciate, first of all, the person had the audacity to reach out to you. And I believe then it becomes your duty to lend a helping hand to that person. So like I said, it starts from the tiniest things you do for somebody to the biggest things that you help with somebody. Yeah.
Great. So what would you do if you knew you could not fail?
Oof. Don't you think it would be quite boring to
I
know
know,
to know
right?
the future? For example, imagine like if I already knew that my next episode is going to get 500 downloads, I might not get that dopamine hit when it does, I mean, whereas, if the next one, for example, fails to get even 10 downloads and then I learn from it and the next one gets 1000, imagine I would be like far superiorly like happy in this case, rather than the initial case, right? And but also I would just add to that it's very, very, I believe that it's very essential for us to even fail, And I say that because the experience you get out of that failure really helps you to build that gut and stamina for any obstacle, that will come your way in the future. And I always say on my podcast also that those failures and bad experiences actually become good lessons and good stories. So definitely seek for those. Yeah.
Indeed, those failures become great lessons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What is the most important thing you would do today to make tomorrow better?
Well, I believe I'm definitely trying to do it through a podcast, the same thing. I believe there were certain times where I felt helpless. There were certain times where I needed that encouragement and motivation to really get up from my bed and really try to at least not make a greatest impact, but at least in that particular moment to just get up and instill that hope and desire in me to really do something. Because there are times in immigrants' journey where from the time of where you had, like I said in the initial, you had the network of your uncles and aunts, even the day you are born. And then you come to this foreign land where you are trying to find a life in a world where life has never existed before, and I needed that help. I needed that push. I really wish and hope like conversations like this, your podcast, my podcast, I wish it would have like existed 4, 5, 6 years ago when I came, so I'm trying to make that impact. And I'm trying to make like I said, even the aspiring or the current immigrants' life better through this podcast, and instilling that hope and will in them that, hey, keep on going. You will definitely succeed. Yeah.
Amazing. So what advice would you give to immigrants in general?
Wow, I will definitely tell them that just be and don't become. And by that I mean that just be what you are. No, just be what you are and don't try to become what you are not. Because even if you try to do that, you are starting in a new world. Why to start with the lie? Start with the truth. Because even if you take up like a different persona and you try to become somebody else, you wouldn't be able to really carry that acting, so to say, or persona for a long time, because that's not personally you and it's not coming from your within. So I would say that just be and don't try to become what you're not. Yeah.
That's so sweet. So just be, don't become what you are not. Yeah, I think that it's so hard to become who you are not. So you hit the
Yeah.
hammer right on the nail. It's time to invite our community to come and support you. Are there any projects you are doing that you want us to know about?
Well, I would definitely really be appreciative, and I highly encourage you to listeners to please listen to the podcast. And and obviously, like, I would love to hear people's feedback on those as well. If there are certain suggestions you have, anything you like, something you did not like, I would love to improve myself also, because feedback, I believe, is so underrated in today's world. It's so important because there's so much influx of these content creators that people like, fine, there's another one right here. But if you really focus on it and look at the research that one has to go through to be able to really put out those conversations and the content, the work it takes to build that, please provide your feedback. Even to you, I would say people should, if you like this episode, reach out to Mommy, tell her that how much you like this conversation. What did you like, what you did not like, what's something else you would have been able to cover. So please provide your feedback to me and to Mommy as well. And obviously, it's available, the podcast is available on all audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just like Mommy's podcast. And I'm also working on my season 2, which will be coming up in the coming months this year in 2024, and watch out for that as well. I'm trying to take the edutainment route. I would love for you to listen to that and tell me once again what you like and what you did not. And also, I am always looking for guests to feature on a podcast and unfold their immigrant journeys. If one of you is interested, please reach out to me. I'm happy to have a quick chat and see how we can collaborate on an episode. And just like this also, I would love to be part of other people's podcasts also. If any of you is listening and want me to be part of your podcast or your show, please reach out to me. I will love to collaborate with you as well. So yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate to you, for me being able to really tell this and tell it to people that, hey, please do all the above. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Of course, it's my pleasure. And may I ask to be on your podcast pretty soon?
100%. It would be a pleasure to have you on the show. Yeah.
Thank you. And finally, please complete the sentence for us. Immigrants are...
Wow, I would say immigrants are one of the bravest souls on the planet. There is this very famous Bollywood movie called 𝐂𝐿𝐻 Express. There is the dialogue in it. It's called, don't underestimate the power of a common man. I would say do not underestimate the resilience of an immigrant. I would say that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gurasis Singh, for coming. Your story is unique, and I think that it will touch many hearts, just as it has touched mine.
Wow, thank you so much for your kind words. Once again, wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure the listeners will enjoy as well. Thank you so much for having me, Mame.